what's the most prominent religion on the planet, if you go by that definition. Strong belief backed up by action that may or may not have a God at its head, in which case the religion of the white supremacists is white supremacy, and the God of that religion of the white supremacists themselves.
Far-right nationalists in the UK are using Christmas to make a political point. In response, the Church of England has launched a rebuttal campaign about who the holiday is for. NPR's Fatima Al-Kassab reports from London.
Christmas carols ring out from a church just off London's Oxford Street. But this year, these age-old songs have become political. This month, a far-right activist who calls himself Tommy Robinson held his own Christmas carol concert outside government buildings in London's Whitehall. Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, has organised white nationalist and anti-immigrant rallies around the country, including a big march through central London called Unite the Kingdom, where Elon Musk addressed the crowds by video. At his open-air Christmas concert this month, he said he was
putting Christ back in Christmas every year in London, in Great Britain.
Yaxley Lennon has been in and out of prison for various offences, including assault. He told the crowd at this open-air concert that he found God behind bars. And since then, there's been a notable presence of Christian symbols at his far-right rallies, wooden crosses, crusader costumes, calls to defend God, faith, family, homeland. That language may be familiar to the Christian right in America, but until now, it hasn't been a part of right-wing politics here. The Church of England is concerned about all of this and is mounting a campaign to fight back.
Christmas is for all, the welcome of Christmas for all.
Bishop Aaron Aurora is leading the Church of England's new holiday PR campaign to counter the far right. They've put out YouTube videos.
Every year we hear stories that somehow Christmas is being cancelled.
Or that somehow the joy of Christmas is under threat.
And posters on public transit across the country showing baby Jesus not at a stable, but at a bus stop.
With words on the poster such as, all are welcome, outsiders welcome, and Jesus has always been in Christmas, countering the message put out by some that somehow Jesus has been erased from Christmas.
This new wave of Christian nationalism is coming from America, says Linda Woodhead, Professor of Theology and Religious Studies at King's College London.
In its latest iteration of Christian nationalism in the USA, the Christian symbols and politics, Republican, MAGA, Trump-led politics have become so bound up with religion.
She says the far right is experimenting with the same formula here.
Tommy Robinson, I think he's testing the waters maybe to see if it's going to actually work here, if this is going to help or hinder the movement.
Bishop Aurora hopes to challenge this Christian nationalist idea of Christmas with messages like the one in this video.
It's Christmas.
It belongs to us all.
And everyone's invited.
That remind people that this holiday is for everyone. Fatima Al-Kassab, NPR News, London.
"2025 has been a big year for artificial intelligence, especially for short AI-generated videos that people are posting online. The kids call it AI slop, and NPR's Jeff Brumfield and Shannon Bond have spent much of the year rolling around in that slop. They are here with the highlights and what it means. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Scott.
Oink, oink.
So we're gonna talk about 3 fake video today's, all of which have been widely shared online. Shannon, let's start with you. What's our first slop entry?
Well, back in October, this was a Saturday. It was one of the days of those big No Kings protests, right, against the Trump administration. President Trump posted this AI-generated video of him flying a fighter jet. The jet says King Trump on the side. He's wearing a crown. He flies over a city full of protesters and dumps what looks like poop all over them. You've probably seen it.
Sure have.
And the video is set to the song Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins. I should say as an aside here, Loggins is not happy about his music being used in this video. He asked for it to be taken down back in October. It has not since been taken down. Now, this video is, of course, obviously fake, right? Like, I don't think anyone's watching it thinking Trump is really flying a fighter jet. And we have seen the president share AI videos and imagery before. He did actually a lot during the 2024 campaign. He and his supporters seem to really love these kind of memes. But since he's taken office this year, this kind of strategy, it's really something we've seen not just the president, but his whole administration embrace. The White House and the Department of Homeland Security, their social media accounts post these sort of meme videos and images often made with AI. And I think, what this tells us, given we're heading into midterm elections next year, we should expect to see even more AI-generated political content all over our feeds.
I mean, Shannon, this is so prevalent. You're seeing Trump and his allies return this more and more and more. What has the White House said about their use of, I feel like it's fair to say this is almost like propaganda videos that they're creating with AI.
Yeah, and it should be clear. It's not always clear that the White House itself or the White House staff are making this. In some cases, like this fighter jet video, we're seeing, the president or administration accounts resharing content that's been made by other people online. The White House doesn't tend to comment on these specific videos, but what they have said in the past in general about this social media approach, they've said sort of things like, the memes will continue. It's clearly a form of messaging I think they think resonates with their audience. And, look, this is a very online administration. This is a very online president. And this is, they're very much engaging in the language of what is online at the moment. And it's increasingly becoming AI.
So that's the first trend we're talking about. Let's move on to video number 2. It came from a little company. Nobody's really heard about it. We haven't talked about it that much. It's called OpenAI. Google it. So it showed the company's CEO committing crimes. Jeff, what's going on here?
Yeah, this second video came from an app OpenAI rolled out earlier this fall called Sora, and that app has made AI slop super easy to generate. One of the features of Sora is you can put other people's faces and voices into your video with their permission. One of the first people to grant permission was Sam Altman, OpenAI's CEO. He let people make videos with his likeness, and an OpenAI employee created this video of Altman in what appears to be a Target. It's surveillance video, and Altman seems to be shoplifting computer chips for his AI company.
Please, I really need this for Sora inference. This video is too good.
Now, this is an inside joke about AI's endless need for computing, but it's really notable for a couple of reasons. First, it shows that AI videos can now put real people into completely fake situations. You can make the CEO of a company commit fake crimes and make it look pretty real. But that's not the only fake stuff that Sora is capable of producing. So, we've also seen news stories about Sora producing fake videos of people stuffing ballot boxes, fake local news interviews. And this is creating a lot of concerns, especially, as Shannon just said, we're going into an election year next year, and Sora has basically lowered the bar for slop to 0.
So that's two different extremes here. Jeff, you're talking about ways that these fake videos can get into the real news cycle very quickly. Shannon, you're talking about just totally farcical propaganda, for lack of another word. Let's move on to our final video. This is one maybe our listeners have seen. It's racked up like 200 million views on TikTok. Tell us about the bunnies, Shannon.
Yeah, so this video, it looks also pretty realistic. It looks like Ring camera footage of some very cute bunnies bouncing around on a backyard trampoline at night. And you can imagine, right? People post these kinds of videos, right, from their actual Ring cameras. And so when this was posted on TikTok this summer, a lot of people were fooled into thinking it was real. There was no watermark on the video itself, disclosing that it was made with AI. TikTok has since put its own AI label on the post, but, judging from the comments at the time, lots and lots of people just totally thought it was real. And I think what's interesting about this one, it's quite different than the other examples we've talked about, but this is the kind of, mindless, cute engagement bait. It's animals, right? That's so prevalent on the internet. It's always been prevalent on the internet, right? And so in some ways, it's not surprising that now we're seeing AI versions of this. But what strikes me is this is the kind of stuff I am seeing all over my social media feeds at this point. And whether or not they are clearly labeled as AI, it really does start to blur the boundaries. And it makes people feel, I think, like this AI slop is inescapable if you are going to be online.
And if it is inescapable, I'm just wondering, Jeff, is there anything we could do about that?
Well, the first thing is, until there's some sort of regulation and labeling, you're probably just going to have to accept, Scott, that you're going to be duped sooner or later. I mean, I think all of us at this point have seen videos that are AI. But that being said, there are some things to watch out for. AI videos tend to be very short because it takes a lot of computing to make them, and they often contain scenarios that if you take a second, you'll realize are kind of unrealistic. Like, all those bunnies aren't going to bounce on a trampoline all at once. A reverse image search can help too, or searching a news story on the event you're seeing. But interestingly, Scott, one of the things researchers I spoke to about this say is they actually don't want people to become cynical and just assume everything is fake, because when that happens, it makes it really hard to hold bad actors to account. People can say, oh, that's just fake. I didn't really do that thing. And so we've got to try to cling to reality, even for the cute animal videos. That raccoon that passed out next to the toilet, I thought that was AI, but I did my homework, and I'm relieved, and it brought a little joy into my life to see that a raccoon really can still get drunk in a liquor store in 2025, and that's a real thing.
We can always count on raccoons to give us realistic, entertaining internet content, I think.
Let's hope the raccoons aren't put out of work by all this AI image generation.
That was NPR's Shannon Bond and Jeff Brumfield. Deep, deep, deep into the slop. Thank you, and my condolences to both of you.
Thanks, Scott.
The gay rights movement is changing everything.
In 2025, many federal scientific grants were disrupted, frozen, or cut under the Trump administration, affecting thousands of research awards and billions of dollars in funding. Much of that science was focused on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some scientists argue that we're just beginning to understand the implications of these disruptions. NPR's Katie Riddle reports.
In the early months of 2025, Noam Ross started hearing about federal research grants getting canceled.
Especially on topics related to health equity and transgender health, LGBTQ health of various sorts.
Ross is a researcher himself and now runs a nonprofit called Our Open Sci that supports open source scientific coding. He spent time tracking and studying infectious disease. As he watched his colleagues losing grant after grant, he wanted to help. He noticed there was no central database to gather information on which grants specifically were being cut.
And I have a background where I've done a lot of projects of essentially trying to wrest data from like uncooperative government systems and, badly organized databases. And so I started sort of trying to scrape this information off of NIH websites and such.
A project called Grant Witness was born. He and a colleague tracked science and research grants cut in 2025 across federal agencies. He says he's been struck by the extent to which DEI has been targeted. A report from the Urban Institute examining his data, for example, found that nearly 90% of the canceled grants at the National Science Foundation included at least one word related to DEI. He worries that the administration sees this research as a distraction from real scientific investigations.
And I think it's really important to go in and report on all of these health equity projects and minority health projects. They are really important for our collective health.
Take research by Whitney Wharton, a professor at Emory University.
All of my research is under the Alzheimer's prevention umbrella.
She focuses on lifestyle and pharmaceutical interventions to prevent Alzheimer's. Wharton got an email in February saying 2 of her grants were canceled.
I've been with my wife 8 years, and she's seen me cry 3 times. This was the 4th time. I was absolutely gutted.
She studies longitudinal groups of people and evaluates their risk of getting Alzheimer's and how to prevent it. One such group is trans people. That's the grant that NIH specifically told her they would no longer pay to study.
And they said that issues surrounding the trans community, now I'm paraphrasing, were often unscientific, lacked rigorous scientific investigation, and did not benefit the majority of Americans.
Wharton says she is concerned about the well-being of trans people, but that is not the primary reason she's focused on this and other marginalized groups, including certain racial demographics.
I do that not for necessarily the sake of inclusivity. I do that because certain groups of people are more at risk for Alzheimer's disease compared to others.
People who are under-resourced, socially vulnerable, disproportionately stressed or lonely, among other risk factors, are more susceptible to certain diseases. That's the case for many marginalized groups. Research already shows that Black people are significantly more likely to develop Alzheimer's than white people. She's trying to determine if that's true for other groups as well.
The risk factors that I am studying are overrepresented in these groups. Those would be things like social isolation, aging alone in place.
If she can specifically help those groups at higher risk of getting Alzheimer's, she says, she can help everyone avoid it. Katie Everettle, NPR News.
It's been almost a year since wildfires devastated much of the Los Angeles area. We're going to hear about Altadena, where the Eden fire killed 19 people and destroyed more than 9,000 buildings last January. Freddie Sage is a lifelong resident of Altadena, which has been home to his family for generations. His relatives lost several properties in the Eden fire, and Sage had extensive smoke damage to his home. He and his sister created the Altadena Coalition after the fire, and what started as an immediate emergency response to hand out supplies has become a larger and more prolonged effort. Freddie Sage joins us now from Altadena. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Scott, for having me.
How are you? What's the past year been like for you?
The longest and toughest year of my life, and I've had a few tough years in 51 years.
Help us understand that and get a grip on what you've been going through.
First, from a personal side, we lost my parents' home, and they're in their 80s. We lost my sister's home and my brother's homes, commercial properties, and so having everybody displaced from a family that was all living within a mile has really altered how our family lives and how our family sees each other. Watching the devastation across the community, hitting so many people all at once, all sharing the same type of trauma, has been something to see. And it's a very slow process. Early on, the biggest problem was immediate and interim housing. That had become very, very complicated and very costly. In doing so, it's dispersed, about 40,000 residents across the country, believe it or not.
They had to move there just to be able to find a place to live.
Yeah, well, to find a place to live or to have an immediate place to live. What we saw was a lot of generational families. So we had grandma living with grandchild. And then when you have these insurance policies, you have what's called an ALE, or an alternative living expense. And those expenses are really for one family. The insurance company doesn't really want to take into consideration 3 families. I know some people have been in a hotel for a year. So you put grandma and grandpa in a hotel, what happens to the kids that was living there? What happened to the grandchildren that were living there? So they starting to get dispersed. At around the 3 to 4 month mark, I had identified about 1,600 residents actually sleeping in their cars because they didn't feel safe in public shelters. So we created a interim housing symposium to bring in all the state, federal, and local agencies to try to assist with some form of housing. Once housing kind of gotten settled, then we moved into the next phase of what their recovery looks like.
I'm just breathless thinking about all the agencies and all the paperwork and all the initials of government agencies you've had to deal with.
What I noticed immediately, in the second week out, all these agencies start landing, and they kind of don't operate in a singular fashion. So if you wanted something, you got to go to FEMA to get this information. You got to go to SBA to get this information. I've spent, 30 years also as a event, festival, and trade show producer. So I was the first one to bring everybody all together, because I can do that, but they can't coordinate together. We would have these town halls where we'd be able to get that information all at once. What we also saw was you can tell someone, both in trauma or a senior or someone with a disability or someone with another issue, what they need to do, but people would just look dumbfounded. Okay, now what do I actually do? So what we began doing was immediately taking seniors, opening up their computer and putting in their SBA information and filling it out for them, doing the same for FEMA, doing the same for Red Cross, because explaining to someone took a lot longer than actually just sitting there and doing it for them.
Why did you and your sister decide to create the Altadena Coalition?
When I woke up The house that I was born in and got married in was gone. My brother's house was gone. My sister's house was gone. My uncle's business was gone. And we all lived together in Altadena. I mean, I had, maybe 40 relatives live in the 91001 address, get decimated. It was natural to run back and help our residents. We have a commercial building, which is my former law firm. So we kind of made that like our ground zero, helping people, allowing people to store things, letting people sleep there. Even it was Ramadan and one of the mosques had burned. They had nowhere to go. And we gave them one of the units so that they could pray. So it started as a natural reaction to help.
What's it like for Altadeans to try and celebrate the holiday when so many families seem to be out of position and displaced and spread across the country?
You see people go through different phases, instead of phases of grief, but phases of recovery. And they seemed very strong and hard-willed all the way right around maybe a week before Thanksgiving is when we really saw it hit them, where the homes that they carved turkey from for 40, 50 years is gone. The pan that they baked that grandma left them, or a special knife, and then realizing that they're not going to host Thanksgiving at home. And then as Christmas comes, we can just see people really decline and really feel the loss of what they had. So we threw a big Christmas party for them. We invited everybody. We bought bands and food and music and tried to give a sense of being back home in Altadena. But I think the holidays have really been difficult for them because it really shows what they lost.
And how much hope is in your heart this season?
I have to have hope. People rely on me to have hope. We got to keep the hope for them.
Freddie Sage is founder of the Altadena Coalition. Thank you for being with us, and may I offer you good holidays.
Thank you, Scott. We don't want to be forgotten, and we want to thank NPR for not forgetting us.
I ever tell you about the first time I leave the state of Georgia?
When was that?
A few minutes back.
Go on.
Yes. Now, my daughter, she's married to a Pullman porter, She's always on the go. New York, Detroit, St. Louis. I said, well, now that's all well and good, Tommy Lee, but I just don't feel the need for it. So here it is. First time. And I might tell you, Miss Daisy, Alabama ain't looking like much so far.
A Mobile police officer claims he's living without heat or AC. He says his apartment complex won't help because of his race. Our Brendan Kirby joining us now in the studio. And Brendan, you spoke with him.
I did, Cameron, and he says that he's lived there for years and generally likes the area, but he says management doesn't seem concerned or interested in fixing the problem. Eric Matthews has filed a fair housing complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development against Park West Apartments, where he's lived for about 5 years. The 19-year veteran of the Mobile Police Department says his apartment off Hillcrest Road hasn't had working heat or air conditioning for at least 8 months, and that none of the major appliances work. Matthews says management told him they can't afford the repairs. He says when he asked to move into another unit, managers told him there were none available. But he says a white friend of his got a different answer.
I sent them up there to see if they had anything available. And they gave him a piece of paper, said, yeah, we have some available within 2 months.
Matthews' attorney, Josh Briskman, says the explanation seems clear to him.
And frankly, I believe this is the most blatant case of racial discrimination that I have seen recently. You would think this kind of thing wouldn't happen anymore, but it does in 2025 and 2026.
HUD could investigate and pursue the case. Otherwise, Matthews could file a federal lawsuit. Briskman says he's not looking for a financial windfall.
I just want Officer Matthews to get an apartment where he has heating and cooling, and to have them fulfill the obligations of their lease agreement. It's gone on so long that it's rubbed a little salt in his wounds, if you will.
I spoke with the property manager who forwarded my questions to the apartment's attorneys, and I left a message for the corporate office of Blue Rock Premier Properties, which owns the complex, but I didn't immediately get a response. Now, it's important to note that this is just an allegation and that it's not unusual for defendants not to comment at this stage. Reporting live in the News Center, Brendan Kirby, Fox 10 News.
Medical apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present.
The rising cost of living has prompted many people to sell their blood plasma to earn extra money. This is the yellow fluid pumped through our veins. It's needed to produce many life-saving medicines. David Martin Davies from Texas Public Radio looks at some of the difficult questions raised when people who are often desperate for cash sell their plasma.
Last October, there was a crude but whimsical painting of an enthusiastic Dracula on a window at the Grifols Plasma Center in downtown San Antonio. It was a Halloween decoration, but you have to wonder if having a vampire leering at blood plasma donors was in good taste. Spain-based Grifols is one of the world's largest producers of plasma-derived medicines, and in 2024, it reported a revenue of about $8 billion. That was due in part to people like Octavia Rodriguez, who comes here for a specific reason.
Oh, for the extra cash?
She says she donates twice a week, and she even takes iron supplements to help deal with the effects.
I could barely stand when I got home.
And Rodriguez says she's selling plasma to get by.
Hopefully, if I get the second job, I'll quit this. Don't have to really come back here anymore.
Most plasma donors in the U.S. come from lower-income households. According to the study from the University of Michigan, the interlinkage between blood plasma donation and poverty in the United States, paid plasma donation has become a common economic coping strategy among Americans dealing with the high rates of poverty and steep increases in the cost of essential expenses.
We have this industry that's based around getting people to sell their plasma twice a week, every week, in perpetuity, as long as they can.
Kathleen McLaughlin, author of the book Blood Money, The Story of Life, Death, and Profit Inside America's Blood Industry, says the multi-billion-dollar plasma industry depends on American poverty.
It made me understand how many millions of Americans are just on the fringes economically, and this is something they need to do to get by.
But a new study shows the extra income that plasma donors get allows them to avoid predatory debt traps.
What we found was when a plasma center opens in a neighborhood, the young adults there become 18% less likely to open a new payday loan.
Emily Gallagher is a professor of finance at the University of Colorado Boulder and the co-author of the study Blood Money, Selling Plasma to Avoid High-Interest Loans. Gallagher says the money paid out by a plasma center is equivalent to what FEMA would inject into a local area after a major natural disaster, and this is happening year after year.
In 2021, the average plasma center paid up to $6 million in donor compensation.
Furthermore, another recent study, Financial Incentives and Public Safety, the Role of Blood Plasma Donation Centers in Crime Reduction, found that the opening of a plasma center in a city leads to an approximate 12% drop in the overall crime rate, primarily by reducing property and drug-related offenses. The crime reduction effect is thought to be the result of both the legal income provided to donors and drug screening requirements at the centers. Gallagher said these findings present difficult ethical questions about allowing the paid plasma market to exist in the United States. Some people object to the idea that poor people are being exploited, but on the other hand, these people are also being given an opportunity to make extra money without taking on high-interest short-term loans or breaking the law. For NPR News, I'm David Martin Davies in San Antonio.
Stop using and selling drugs to one another. See, we're getting ready to be put in a real trap with this legalization of marijuana. So everybody, every black person can be unemployed, and then they can sit in their corner and get high on marijuana with whatever they decide to put in it. And people won't be asking for jobs and being determined that they're going to get jobs and going to get an education. No, everybody can start getting high on marijuana. because somebody said it's medicinal and it's legal.
What about,
so we better beware.
What about the people who say the legalization of marijuana is fighting against racism because you have so many black people who are unjustly incarcerated as a result of racist enforcement of these drug laws? So this would be a good thing, and it would keep black people out of greater confinement.
No, we can do it by stop using and selling drugs to one another. See, if I'm not using drugs, then I can't be incarcerated for drugs. And I see so many males, young males in my practice who have become psychotic, almost never to return to normal from marijuana use because you don't know what's in it.
Teens who use cannabis are more likely to perform poorly at school. They're also more likely to have mental health symptoms of anxiety and depression. Those are the findings of a new study in the journal Pediatrics. NPR's Ritu Chatterjee has more.
The study drew on survey data from tens of thousands of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders between 2018 and 2022. The good news is that a majority, nearly 3/4, reported they did not use cannabis. Dr. Ryan Sultan is a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Columbia University and lead author of the study.
About 26% are reporting having had some cannabis use at some point.
Only 8% of the teens reported using cannabis often.
The higher frequency group are individuals who are using weekly or daily or near daily.
He says the others use it once a month or even less.
Most teens that are using cannabis are low frequency users. And what we still found was poor academic performance seen in things like GPA and truancy.
And they had no college plans. These teens also had a higher chance of having emotional distress and symptoms of anxiety and depression compared to those who didn't use cannabis. Psychologist Krista Lisdahl studies substance use in adolescents at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Lisdahl wasn't involved in the new study. She notes that the more often teens used cannabis, the more likely they were to struggle at school and emotionally.
It's once again more evidence of these dose-dependent links between cannabis use, especially recent nearly daily use, being linked with detrimental academic outcomes, emotional outcomes.
She says recent studies by her and others show that the brains of teens who use cannabis are different from other teens. Imaging studies show differences in parts of the brain related to executive functioning, emotional regulation, and problem solving. Lisdahl says another finding is that teenagers who use cannabis
tend to show this pattern of having to use more of their prefrontal cortex to do a cognitive task. So it looks like their brain is working harder to get the same result.
While studies have yet to show that cannabis causes these outcomes, Lisdahl says it doesn't change the message for teens.
The message is to delay cannabis use as long as you can, especially while the brain is developing.
And that development continues until age 25. Ritu Chatterjee, NPR News.
Globalization mandates, of course, from the most powerful white people, these blackouts. You have a totally energy independent state like Texas, plenty of natural gas, oil, gasoline, coal. They were forced to keep up with the mandates and convert up to 20% of their power grid to green energy by 2021. Green energy being wind, solar, hydro, battery, etc. So that 20% freezes over. And the 80% that's left, that always is worked, the oil, the coal, the gas, is not enough to supply the rest of the state. So they have to cut off certain parts of the grid to keep it working. And this is what's going to happen in 2025 when that green energy is mandated to be 50% of the grid. What happens when we have a snowstorm there? And what happens in Chicago and New York? I mean, it's cold most of the year here. So it's big. This green energy thing that they've been pushing through this Green New Deal, and 5 years ago this wanted to happen in Texas, but they were forced to take fully, perfectly functioning parts of their grid and convert it to these green energy, and now that green energy freezes over and the rest of the grid is all vulnerable.
I'm John Hood in the Croatan neighborhood of Virginia Beach. It's about 26 miles onshore from Dominion Energy's Coastal Virginia offshore wind project, a project that's been going on for quite some time now, but has now been put on pause, according to the Department of Interior.
From a citizen perspective, it's pretty disappointing.
Mike Kelly, who lives in the Croatan neighborhood, tells me that's how he felt Monday morning after learning the Department of Interior paused all large-scale offshore wind projects under construction, including the Coastal Virginia offshore wind project.
A project like this that is months away from completion, to have it canceled just like that just doesn't seem to me the best way of doing business in this country.
The pause is because of what's described as national security risk, identified by the Department of Defense, that allegedly found cases of radar interference from moving wind turbines. The pause is set to give the department time to work with leaseholders on mitigating those risks. In a statement made on X, Secretary Doug Burgum announced the pause and went on to say, quote, "One natural gas pipeline supplies as much energy as these 5 projects combined." President Trump is bringing common sense back to energy policy and putting security first. I reached out to Dominion Energy. They say in a statement about the 90-day suspension of work issued, quote, that the project is essential for American national security and meeting Virginia's dramatically growing energy needs. It went on to say stopping the project for any length of time will threaten grid reliability for some of the nation's most important warfighting AI and civilian assets. It will also lead to energy inflation and threaten thousands of jobs. Some neighbors tell me they hope with the ongoing energy need, the project gets back on schedule sooner rather than later.
You've got all the equipment, and this is big equipment, and the parts and pieces already staged, and to essentially say, well, they can just sit there because we're not going to do anything else. I just don't agree with it.
In Virginia Beach, I'm John Hood, WTKR News 3.
Now, this directly affects local Congresswoman Jen Kagan's district. She posted on social media today saying, in part, quote, "I am deeply disappointed in this news." She went on to say, quote, "Halting C.O.W.S, that's the name of the project, halting C.O.W.S at this stage is disastrous for our energy security, our local economy, and our national security as it relates to military readiness."
Now, Virginia Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, along with local Congressman Bobby Scott, released a joint statement that read, "Despite our senior roles on the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committees, the administration has failed to share any new information that supports this sudden and sweeping move to halt all offshore wind development, including a project off a coast of Virginia that is already almost complete and operational."
You're dirt. We think you're dirt, Paul. Who is we? The West, all the superpowers, everything you believe in, Paul. They think you're dirt. They think you're dumb. You're worthless.
I'm afraid I don't understand what you are saying, sir.
Oh, come on, don't bullshit me, Paul. You're the smartest man here. You got them all eating out of your hands. You could own this freaking hotel, except for one thing. You're black. You're not even a nigger. You're an African.
First, since he returned to the White House at the start of the year, President Trump has launched attacks against Iran and built up U.S. military presence in the Pacific and Caribbean seas, striking alleged Venezuelan drug smuggling boats as part of efforts to force the country's leader, Nicolas Maduro, to stand down. He's now entered a hotspot in Africa, Nigeria. Mr. Trump said that U.S. airstrikes targeted the Islamic State group in the northwest of the country, killing multiple IS members. He also said that he did so because the group, which he described as Terrorist Scum, had persecuted innocent Christians. Nigeria's Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar gave his reaction to the BBC.
What I can confirm is a joint operation between Nigeria and the U.S. that has targeted terrorists. It has nothing to do with a particular religion. It is, as far as we're concerned, targeting terrorists that have been attacking Nigerians, period.
I heard more from the BBC's David Waddell.
These attacks were launched by U.S. Africa Command. It revealed it conducted a strike in Sokoto State. Crucially, the attack was launched in coordination with Nigerian authorities, and it follows a pledge by President Trump last month to send troops, as he put it, guns a-blazing if Christians continue to be killed. The Nigerian government says Christians aren't being explicitly targeted, and monitoring groups there say that roughly equal numbers of Christians and Muslims are being killed there. But it's a big concern for President Trump, and it's a big security issue for the Nigerian government.
It's most unusual for the US to be involved in military action in this part of Africa. Why and why now?
Because these attacks have been happening recently, and because they had the authority, I suppose, from the Nigerian government, the coordination with Nigerian authorities to do this. Boko Haram and Islamic State have both been attacking Christian communities, but sectarian violence is a wider issue and has been for some time. There is, however, widespread banditry, including mass abductions, theft of livestock, village raids. It's a major internal security crisis for the Nigerian government, a big headache which it wants to put a lid on this ongoing crisis.
President Trump came to power promising not to get involved in foreign wars, but he's bombed Iran, he's seizing ships off Venezuela, now he's attacking Nigeria. Why is he being drawn into foreign conflicts?
Well, he is also a very activist president. He's not afraid to stir things up, as we've seen from this year's trade war. In July, the US bombed some Iranian uranium enrichment facilities. In his first term, there was a targeted killing of IS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2019, and General Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Quds force, in 2020. So he's not afraid of limited military action. It is true that he campaigned as a peacemaker, as one who he wanted to stop wars, he said. He clearly feels that he needs to do that and wield a big stick.
David Waddell.
Tell me who'll pay reparation on my soul.
Our next story is from Algeria. It's a country in North Africa. For more than a century, Algeria was ruled by France. France invaded Algeria in 1830 and colonized it for 132 years. That period was marked by land seizures, forced displacements, torture, and mass killings. It ended only after a bloody war of independence in 1962. Why are we talking about this history today? Because it has come back to the center of politics. Yesterday, Algeria passed a major law. It declared France's colonial rule a crime. The law calls for an official apology from Paris, and it also demands reparations for colonial-era abuses. France has pushed back against this law, calling the move, quote-unquote, hostile, but Algeria says its national memory is not negotiable. And look at the timing of this move. Ties between Paris and Algiers are already under strain and have already been under strain in recent months. This new law only adds fuel to that. Here's a report.
Algeria has reopened a chapter many thought was closed, not through negotiations or quiet diplomacy, but through its parliament. This week, lawmakers gathered in Algiers for a rare unanimous vote. They passed a law. That law declared French colonial rule a crime. Inside the chamber, the moment was charged. Members waved national flags, chanted slogans, and applauded as the bill was approved. The law places legal responsibility on France for its colonial past in Algeria. It also calls for an official apology. And it demands reparations for the damages caused during more than a century of colonial rule.
We have the political will to condemn French colonization for the indescribable crimes it committed against the Algerian people during the French occupation of Algeria, and to tell France and the French state to bear the responsibility for the crimes committed by colonial France against the Algerian people.
To understand the weight of this vote, you have to look back. France invaded Algeria in 1830. What followed after was 132 years of colonial rule. Algeria was treated as part of France. But its indigenous population lived under a different system. Land was seized, political rights were denied, economic power rested with European settlers. That rule ended only after a brutal war of independence between 1954 and 1962. Algiers says 1.5 million people were killed. French historians give lower estimates, but the violence left deep scars on both sides. Now, Algeria says that history can no longer be managed quietly.
Today, when we refer to criminalizing this colonization, which is a precedent in the history of criminalizing, it means that it will have significant repercussions across Africa.
The timing of the law matters too. Relations between Algeria and France are already strained. Tensions rose last year after Paris recognized Morocco's autonomy plan for Western Sahara. Algeria supports the Polisario Front and their demand for self-determination. That disagreement reopened diplomatic fault lines. It was followed by arrests, expulsions, and stalled dialogue. Against that backdrop, this vote sends a pointed signal. France has condemned the move. Its foreign ministry called the law hostile and warned it could undermine efforts to repair relations. French President Emmanuel Macron has previously described colonization in Algeria as a crime against humanity. But he has stopped short of offering an apology. Algerian lawmakers say that's not longer.
Regarding the law criminalizing colonization, we will demand reparations in the future for the resources that were looted and plundered from Algeria.
Legally, the law does not bind France. It carries no international enforcement. But politically, it matters. It hardens Algeria's position and narrows the space for compromise. The vote is also being watched beyond Paris. Across Africa, demands are growing for recognition of colonial-era crimes, and the return of artifacts, remains, and archives. Algeria's law does not compel action or change the international law, but it draws a line. It pulls colonial history back into the center of modern politics.
What's this thing with Trump and you? It's like me and Letterman. What has he got against you here? I don't get it.
You know, this all dates back to when we were growing up together in Kenya.
Yeah.
And,
Moving on, let's turn our attention to Kenya. A Kenyan man has been sentenced to life in prison in the United States. He was plotting a 9/11-inspired attack on Atlanta, Georgia. His name is Cholo Abdi Abdullah. He is 34 years old. On Monday, Abdullah was hit with 2 consecutive life terms in prison for the terror scheme. He was convicted of multiple crimes.
Today, justice has been served. Abdullah, an al-Shabaab terrorist, sought to replicate the most horrific terrorist attack in our history, as he prepared to hijack a commercial airliner to take down a building on U.S. soil. We thwarted this plot due to the relentless efforts of U.S. law enforcement and thereby likely saved many innocent lives.
Abdullah had been training with al-Shabaab. It is a terrorist organization and an al-Qaeda affiliate based in Somalia. Abdullah joined al-Shabaab in 2015. He spent around a year at multiple safe houses in Somalia where he worked with high-ranking al-Shabaab terrorists. There, Abdullah received military-style training. He learnt how to fire an AK-47 assault rifle and how to make different-sized explosives. Between October 2017 and July 2019, Abdullah became a student at a flight school in the Philippines. His training was funded by al-Shabaab. In January 2019, Abdullah was briefed about the suicide bombing attack. However, he was arrested in the Philippines in July 2019, before he can complete his commercial pilot's license training. After his arrest, Abdullah confessed that he was training to become a pilot on behalf of al-Shabaab so that he could hijack a plane. As part of his attack planning, he searched for the tallest building in Atlanta, Delta Flights, and how feasible it is to carry a knife on board a plane. Abdullah confessed to the FBI that he expected to die in the attack. He also compiled research on post-September 11th hijacking attempts. After his arrest in 2019, Abdullah was transferred to US custody in December 2020. And then, in November 2024, he was found guilty of multiple terror-related crimes. The Al-Shabaab terror group remains one of the top targets of the US. The United States Africa Command has been regularly carrying out airstrikes targeting ISIS and Al-Shabaab in Somalia. And under President Donald Trump, Washington has dramatically intensified its military air campaign. Al-Shabaab, an al-Qaeda-linked terror group, has waged a brutal insurgency in Somalia since the mid-2000s. It has carried out bombings, assassinations, and mass casualty attacks to overthrow the government and impose its hardline version of Islamic rule. The verdict is a stark reminder that Al-Shabaab's threat stretches far beyond Somalia, from training recruits overseas, exporting terror ambitions, and keeping the shadow of extremist violence jihad very much alive.
Why haven't you learned anything?
Student attendance dropped in New Orleans area schools last week as immigration sweeps ramped up across the region. Aubrey Uhas looks at why some parents are keeping their kids at home.
Diane Espinal sits behind the wheel of her car, waiting to pick up a 12-year-old named Darwin from his school on the West Bank.
This is today.
While we wait in the line of cars, she shows me a picture she took of him this morning. Stocky kid with curly hair heading into the building. Today was Darwin's first day back after a week away.
You send that picture to Mom? Yeah, I send a picture right here at the school, make sure he's safe and he's inside, and
Darwin's mom has a pending asylum case, so we aren't using her name. Like many immigrants, she's trying to stay inside so she doesn't come in contact with federal agents. She needed someone to bring Darwin to and from school, so she called the organization Espinal works for, La Voz de la Comunidad, looking for help. The group supports the Latino community in Jefferson Parish and New Orleans. When we get to the school, Darwin is waiting at the curb. Darwin settles himself in the back seat, in between two booster seats that belong to Espinal's kids. He likes school, he says. His favorite subjects are reading, writing, and math.
Were you excited to come back to school this morning? Mm-hmm. Yeah? What'd you do last week while you were at home?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Just bored in the TV.
After a 20-minute drive, we drop him off, and Darwin politely says goodbye.
Nice meeting you.
He heads inside, and his mom comes out to talk.
Pues en casa yo me siento muy bien.
She says she and Darwin have been staying here at her boss's house in New Orleans so she can keep working without having to drive. She felt bad keeping Darwin out of school.
Muy mal porque no me gusta que él falte ni un día a la escuela.
He almost never misses, she says. But she decided driving him herself wasn't worth the risk.
Y la verdad me sentía muy abrumada porque no encontraba la manera de quién me lo llevara. Y pues
there are thousands of parents like her who need help, says Michelle Aguirre. She also works for La Voz.
Well, it's very hard to quantify the impact.
Attendance dropped across New Orleans area schools last week. In Jefferson Parish, which has the largest Hispanic population of any Louisiana school district, 5,400 kids were absent the day after the crackdown started.
They're not receiving the materials. We're talking about 2 weeks without lessons. They're missing exams.
Aguirre says she's trying to convince families to send their kids to school so they don't fall behind, miss out on meals and other services.
We try to reinforce the policy for the school system. They cannot miss school. This and this will happen.
Families are legally required to send their kids and could end up in trouble if they don't. And if kids miss enough school, they could be held back. Aguirre says some parents, like Darwin's mom, just need help getting them there. But others?
They are so afraid and that you can feel like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be a part. I understand that's good, but I prefer for them to miss a complete year, than feel like something will happen when they are away.
They don't want to be separated, she says. And they won't send their kids until federal agents leave. In New Orleans, I'm Aubrey Uhas.
It's a robot. She's a goddamn robot.
And last, there was a time when getting a toy to talk involved pulling a string in its back. But nestling beneath many a Christmas tree this year is a new generation of toys equipped with artificial intelligence. That makes it possible for children to talk to their toys almost as if they were human. Great for bored children, perhaps, but it does raise questions. Arwa Madawi is a columnist for The Guardian newspaper here in the UK, and she told us about her 4-year-old daughter's experience with an AI toy called Grem.
For the first 24 hours, she just loved it. The novelty was very compelling, being able to chat to this thing.
How about a guessing game? I'll think of an animal, and you try to guess it. Ready? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of an animal that is big, gray, and has a long trunk. Can you guess what it is? Yeah. Great. What's your guess? An elephant.
She liked it much more than I thought she would, and she was carrying it everywhere with her. I started to get even a little bit worried just how attached she got to it, because, she tells all of her stuffed animals, I love you, etc., but normally they don't say it back, and with Grem, it was saying, oh, I love you too, I'm going to be with you forever, I love you to the moon and the stars. It was quite creepy.
I love you. I love you too. Big hugs to you. What fun thing shall we do together today?
Jenny Gibson is Professor of Developmental Psychology at the University of Cambridge. She's currently leading a study looking at the impact of AI toys on child development. She began by explaining how interactive toys have developed.
The difference between a toy that's got an embedded generative AI functionality compared to kind of traditional toys that might be able to generate some pre-programmed speech is that these toys can engage in back and forth conversation with you. So rather than just having a set repertoire of phrases that the toy can say, the toy can actually talk back and kind of engage in those sort of back and forth of chat with children.
This has the potential then to make toys actually real friends of the children they're given to. Is that right?
It gives the toy the capability to tune into children's interests, for example. So, if you're interested in trains or pets or whatever, the toy could pick up on that and talk about the things that are of interest to a particular child.
It sounds absolutely fabulous. What is the concern?
There are concerns around children's privacy. So when you're talking to any kind of chatbot, what's happening is that your speech has been sent over to a computer somewhere in the cloud, and that's used to process the response. So what's happening to children's speech and children's data? For me, there are also concerns about who might have access to these toys. So there are also safeguarding considerations as well.
One of the things that the alarm has been raised over has been about a potential impact on children's development. Do you have concerns over that?
I think I'm cautiously optimistic about this, while also, wanting to protect children. So the research that we've been doing has been looking at products designed and marketed for children under 5. And for under 5s, it's this really developmentally sensitive period where those back and forth interactions and that human connection is actually driving learning and development. And I think a big developmental concern is whether, a generative AI toy might be seen as kind of disrupting that process, because typically that back and forth happens between humans. So we don't really know what it means for it to happen with a machine. On the other hand, I think more optimistically, a lot of concern around technology-based toys is that kind of passive engagement. And I think generative AI brings a new possibility for that back and forth that we know is really helpful. So I think when it's designed with children's developmental needs in mind, there could be some positives as well as some risks.
Professor Jenny Gibson speaking to my colleague Johnny Diamond.
Okay, so if I had stayed in Wisconsin,
on some Wisconsin roads, your car may be photographed by AI-powered law enforcement cameras. Flock cameras can not only read license plates, but also register car color, make and model, and stickers and damage.
That information is uploaded to a database that can be accessed by police departments and federal agencies nationwide.
This year, at least 221 Wisconsin law enforcement agencies used flock cameras. That's according to an investigation by the Wisconsin Examiner.
But some communities are concerned about the camera's potential for misuse by individuals or simply for their use as a powerful government surveillance tool.
Last month, the Verona Common Council voted not to renew their contract after receiving a flood of public comments opposing them. Here is Mara Helmke, alderperson for Verona's 2nd District and Common Council president.
We don't have any markings around our community that say that you are going to be tracked, that you are going to be on camera, right? And so effectively there's no way in and out of the city pretty much without being tracked via these cameras. There was no consent around that.
The Beaver Dam Police Department has been using flock cameras for about 5 years now. They have 12 cameras around the city. Daniel Coons is a detective at the Beaver Dam Police Department. He joins us now for a look at how his department uses the system. Detective Coons, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Can you give us the basics, the nuts and bolts of how your department interacts with these flock cameras in your community?
Well, I would say that flock has become sort of an integral part of our tool belt, if you want to call it that. As of about 2020 or 2021, it really developed into a useful tool for us. At first, it was sort of in the preliminary stages. It was kind of unknown as to how it would affect sort of our daily functioning of our police department, but it's proven itself over the past 4 or 5 years to be really an effective tool for us. And obviously, a lot of departments across the region and the entire country have continued to use them and implement them as part of their regular operating procedures.
Now that you've had some years to get this under your belt, how might this work? How might you use flock cameras as part of an investigation?
Flock is used in a few different ways, at least at our police department. I can't speak on behalf of how other departments use them. Some might use them in a more restrictive way. We use them really in both a proactive and a reactive way. What I mean by that is there's times where we may be looking for someone related to a crime. Say there's a incident that occurs outside of our city, and we get alerted that this vehicle with a license plate is involved in some sort of theft ring or something of that sort. We can then go into our system, enter that plate or vehicle into the flock system and into what's called a hot list. And if that vehicle were to come into Beaver Dam, it's in past one of our flock cameras, we would get alerted to that before that vehicle can continue to come into Beaver Dam and commit a crime against businesses or residents here. So it allows us to proactively respond to crimes before they occur. Those also can include cases where it runs past the camera and a vehicle is entered into NCIC, sort of associated either with a missing person or a different, criminal group, or the vehicle stolen. That allows us to go detect or try to find that vehicle before they either steal a vehicle in town here, and allows us to check the welfare if it's associated with a missing persons file. We've had that several times where we were able to stop a vehicle, check the welfare of a potential occupant who has been listed at NCIC as missing or a check welfare. And it really allows law enforcement a proactive approach to finding vehicles that might be involved in things that otherwise we would have no idea. On a reactive side, it allows us to enter plates that are, from an investigation size, it allows us to enter plates that have been involved in crimes already in Beaver Dam, and it allows us to find vehicles that we are looking for rather than having squads driving around just looking, arbitrarily for cars. It's essentially eyes out there on the street for us looking for particular vehicles that we are looking for that are associated with a current criminal investigation.
As you mentioned, departments have different policies in different communities, different states around the country. One of them has to do with, when that use of flock is initiated, what kind of justification, what kind of coding and language goes into that. On a practical level, if you as a detective are saying, hey, I think these plates are involved in a crime, I want to have flock notify us, what do you do? What kind of information goes into that?
Well, again, I can speak for our department, and again, every department operates a little bit different in what their policies and procedures are. We have fairly strict policies in terms of what we require officers to do when they are looking for a vehicle in flock. So you can't just randomly go into the system. I shouldn't say you can't. You can, but there are checks and balances to that system that requires officers or detectives to enter two things. It's a two-part search. It's a reason for the search and associated complaint number. There's not always going to be a police report number associated with the search because there may not be an open investigation or an open case. Say you have a tip from another agency that they're a vehicle that they're looking for, and we just simply want to see if that vehicle has come into the city of Beaver Dam. We were able to search that, and we would use the reason being is a vehicle associated with investigation out of city ABC, and then you would write Wisconsin, the source of that information to say a Wisconsin crime alert that we were made aware of. So there's really two ways that we can on the back end then double check that that search was legitimately associated with that particular investigation. So there's ways that Flock requires it now for you to enter a reason to make the search. So part of it is on Flock's end that requires that, but on the back end for us, when we go in and do sort of a random audit of various searches, which me and other sergeants and administrators do, we're able to then associate that particular search or that plate of a vehicle with that reason that they entered so that it's validated as being a legitimate search.
Now, there have been a couple concerns raised about Flock. I'm guessing they've been brought to you or you've heard them. One, privacy. If we've got these cameras out there, well, they're cameras all the time, even if you're not making a request of them. What do you say to people who say, hey, I don't feel comfortable with these, in effect, surveillance cameras being out there all day, every day?
I don't blame them for having that question. I think more transparency can counteract that concern, and that transparency can come from law enforcement agencies. And I can, again, speaking only on behalf of my department and conversing about this topic with the chief all the way since the implementation of the cameras, we have never shied away from public inquiries about Flock cameras. We've done presentations in front of our city council. We've offered to go on and talk with anybody that wants to do interviews, hence why I'm speaking with you now. So I think the comfort of those cameras come from explaining to people how they work, what they do, and how we utilize them is super important, particularly in an era where people become concerned about surveillance. I will say this. LPRs, license plate reader cameras, have been around for a couple of decades. So the idea of cameras being out there tracking license plates is not necessarily a very new one. The technology behind Flock is somewhat new in that it allows departments to interconnect with each other and share information. But it's no different essentially than having 11 officers, at least at our agency, having 11 officers on these street corners running license plates. We obviously don't have the resource to do that, nor would we. But this allows us to capture those license plates, which are in public, and there's no expectation of privacy out in public when you're driving around your vehicle. Your license plate by law is required to be legible and visible to law enforcement or anybody.
Detective Coons, we'll leave it there. Thanks again for joining us.
I appreciate your time.
That's Daniel Coons, detective at the Beaver Dam Police Department. He joined us for a look at how AI-powered cameras are used to enforce the law in that community. For a look at the privacy and civil rights concerns surrounding Flock cameras in Wisconsin, we're joined by John McCrae-Jones, policy analyst at the American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When it comes to the use of these Flock cameras here in Wisconsin, what are your greatest concerns?
So Flock is a particular company that operates automatic license plate readers, commonly called ALPRs. But that also misses the point. Automated license plate readers don't just read your license plate. Imagine facial recognition, but for your car. So basically, when you drive past an automated license plate reader or a Flock camera, it records the make, model, color, dent, bumper stickers, and even visible occupants inside the car. And then it creates basically a digital fingerprint of your car and your day-to-day life every time you drive down the street. And once that data is collected, it isn't just stored locally. It enters a national searchable database used by thousands of law enforcement agencies and private institutions like homeowner associations and private businesses. So this matters because it transforms everyday vehicles into a searchable tag on your movements.
Now, we hear from police departments, for example, who sign contracts with Flock. They say, well, hey, our contract specifies we can negotiate whether or not they share this data, how long they store it, that kind of thing. Do you have any confidence that, hey, we could structure police, for example, contracts with Flock in a way that it's not being shared, that we don't have to worry about our privacy?
I don't, just because there's a lack of transparency around that. And the reality of the situation is how Flock's data sharing works is that you can share with different departments, but the problem is once that data gets out of local control, we don't know where it goes. And the reality is that law enforcement departments can share their data across borders. And there's actually been a recent report by Wired magazine that some private data of American citizens is collected by their Philippine employees outside of our borders. So once that data gets out, we don't know where it goes. And I think the best way to stop this data from getting out is just not collecting it in the first place.
Police departments and, of course, Flock itself have said, hey, this is useful. We're able to spot vehicles, for example, that have triggered Amber Alerts, or we're able to prosecute car thefts or theft rings by the use of these cameras. Is it a worthwhile trade-off, those concerns about privacy and cybersecurity versus, hey, we're maybe solving crimes?
I disagree. One, because long-term studies of ALPR installations show inconsistent effects on crime rate. And until we have clear independent data that license plate readers are actually preventing crime, I don't believe that the trade-off for privacy is worth it, especially because law enforcement and Flock refuses to use independent studies to verify their claim that there is a drastic impact on crime. And the other thing that I want to note is that here in Wisconsin, violent crime wasn't a top 10 search for any of the 221 law enforcement departments that use Flock cameras. We did see thousands of law enforcement departments use single word justifications like investigation or suspect or person to justify what they were searching. And I think that lack of transparency of not knowing why law enforcement agents are searching people's movements and where their cars are located is ripe in potential for abuse. Even though I do say, I admit, I don't believe that most law enforcement agents are misusing surveillance technology. But if you have thousands and tens of thousands of searches going on, you only need 1%, and that has major problems.
If departments are using these things, what would you like to see for how they justify the use of these, how they track them, how the kind of transparency they can provide?
Perfect. One, require detailed public reporting on all Flock searches, including precise reasons, outcomes, not one-word categories. I would like to have a log that shows what officer searched, when it was searched, and the justification, 3, 4, 5 sentences explaining why. Limit data retention to very short windows unless it's tied to active investigation. Ban sharing with federal agencies like ICE or enforcement of laws criminalizing reproduction or gender affirming care. There was a situation in Texas where I believe the number was 83,000 searches, where a law enforcement agency in Texas searched states' databases like Illinois and Washington during an investigation about a woman who allegedly had a self-managed abortion. So stopping data sharing with law enforcement agencies outside of the state of Wisconsin, prohibit agencies from granting access to private cameras without transparent public consent and oversight, mandate judicial review or warrants before using this data in prosecution, and include sunset clauses, forced renewal, and reauthorization by legislators.
Are you hoping that state lawmakers will address the Flock issue and either say, no or yes, but, and have some kind of transparency and use requirements?
100%. So working for the ACLU, my answer for surveillance is no. But I understand that the ACLU doesn't speak for Wisconsin voters and Wisconsin citizens. What I would love to see is community control over police ordinances passed at local levels and hopefully at the state level. And what that does is it adds a framework that allows oversight, transparency, and a democratic process into what surveillance technologies are used on citizens. And to answer your previous question, it allows community leaders, private citizens, and elected officials to have the conversation and come to a decision on what privacy is willing to be exchanged under the guise of safety. Because what C.O.W.S does is every single surveillance technology used or will be used in the future requires a legislative hearing where law enforcement, community leaders, and other stakeholders can come in and make the case for or against this technology. It forces elected officials to hold a vote on what surveillance technologies will be deployed on their communities. And then it's followed up with a yearly annual report that answers questions on, did this technology impact safety? Who has access to the data that is collected? Where is the data going? How long is the data being stored? Are these technologies being disproportionately targeted at people of color, migrant communities, queer people, different religious groups? And you have that annually in a report, so then we can come back the next year for another legislative hearing or in 2 years and say, hey, this technology did make communities safer. We are willing to keep investing taxpayer money into this. Or no, this technology doesn't have the payoff that was sold to us by these private companies. And we shouldn't invest our taxpayer money into this. And maybe we should invest it in other places like education.
Just last month, the city of Verona elected not to renew their contract with Flock after hearing similar privacy concerns to some you've raised. Are you seeing communities that might have been moving toward Flock keeping it at arm's length? Do you see a trend here at all?
Yeah, 100%. Across the country, we're seeing cities walk back their Flock camera because I think that they were sold in an illusion of safety. And like I mentioned before, violent crime wasn't a top 10 reason for a Flock search out of any of the 221 Wisconsin law enforcement agencies, departments that are using Flock cameras. So if we're not fighting violent crime with these technologies, then what are we doing with it?
John, we'll leave it there. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
That was John McCrae-Jones, policy analyst at the American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin. Earlier, we heard from Daniel Coons, detective at the Beaver Dam Police Department.
Ignorant, gusty renegade, context of white supremacy. I was saying ignorant because they gave the name of Officer Daniel Coons in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Have to see how far that is from Milwaukee. I was thinking Officer Stacy Coons, Rodney King, nigger knocker, right? But maybe they are related. I don't know. Wisconsin, California, but that's what I was thinking. Coons and ignorant. That's ignorant. Context of white supremacy. Our weekly compensatory call-in, not for spectators. Dial in if you have thoughts, observations, if you safely made it through White Jesus' birthday. Let us know. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see. One thing before we get to folks who dialed in, check the social media pages for updates. We'll see about guests and such before we get here for Thursday for Neutralizing Workplace Racism, as well as the book club, Catherine Massey Book Club, this Friday, where we are wrapping up tonight. We bombed the U.S. Capitol. Not all white peoples is racist. We'll see if any of the folks that we've read about meet the bill, classifies white people we think would be doing what would be expected of a well-meaning, non-racist white person. Shout to Eleanor Bumpers. But that'll be Friday. Michael Stewart as well. We'll wrap all that up on Friday. In the meantime, check social media, see if we have programs prior to, before 2025 wraps up official. Some of the audio segments that we heard at the beginning. Let's see. One, Mr. Fuller, when he talks about the number one method for maintaining the system of white supremacy being deception, anything that makes it easier for racists to lie, where you find lots of people, even yourself, having a difficult time figuring out what is true, what is this real, is this fake? All of that benefits master deceiver. I said AI slop. Said they got all these fake videos and you go online. In fact, they even said it's so bad. They say, hey, eventually we're all going to be duped. Seeing something online and you think it's real. And no. And they said the technology has got so good, you can have people who look authentic. Even the example they used, they said President Trump, them sharing the video of him in a plane and he's flying over, and dumping feces on people. And I said, man, Fuller talked about the royalist concept, but wow. Like Fuller said, splashing mud. Like, nah, we gonna throw something brown on you, all right, but we ain't gonna throw no mud on you. Wow. And that's the fake video that he posted. We hope it's fake, right? We hope it's fake. But they said it's so easy because people can agree to have their images uploaded, and we'd heard the audio technology before that even if they don't agree, if you got about 15 seconds, 30 seconds of someone's voice, you can make really quality fakes now, and the technology is just getting better, more easily accessible. All of this benefits racists. More and more fakery, more and more. Even they said to a degree where you have people where they just immediately, anything that gets posted, a raccoon broke into a shop, drunk. Oh, that's fake video. Oh, nope, that's not fake, that's real. But they said this benefits because they try and prosecute people for doing this, and it's, everybody does it, no big deal. System of white supremacy. In fact, that also benefits the system of white supremacy where everybody lies, so it's no big deal. Man, master deceivers clean up. That's kind of the environment that we have, but man, and they said even, what are some tips you can stay, safe and not go out here sharing any old willy-nilly thing, or even just getting fooled yourself, and being confused about what's happening. See how long the video it is. Triangulate. Have you seen this on other sites? What site did you see this on? You're not just going to go off of social media posting, are you? But they did say, hey, we're probably all going to get fooled. Hey, when you got the president sharing these fake videos and such, man, master deceivers. Anyway, even on a planet where all the problems that we have, right? Like people don't have housing and wildfires, and got lead in the water. People don't even have water, period. Food deserts, and just on and on and on and on and on. Why is it the technology that we have and ever being refined, fake videos, all the problems that we have, fake videos, slop, as they call, like that's what we needed, like pronto? Let's see. And even a part of that, the LA Times had a report today about memory manipulation, which I found fascinating. That also, it's the exact same thing. It's called, could memory manipulation one day help treat PTSD, depression, dementia? And they were talking about, I'll just give you one quick paragraph. It says, humans have engaged in this two-way operation of memory revision for as long as we've been conscious. But over the last 2 decades, neuroscientists have found mind-bending ways to control this process, in mice at least, implanting false memories, deleting real memories, resurrecting memories thought lost to brain damage, detaching the memory of an emotional reaction to one event and attaching it to the memory of another. What? Now, they did say this is what they're working on with the albino rodents, but still, that's all of this technology. They're working on this all the time. They might even be lying to us. They might be a little further along in all this technology than what they're telling us right now. Either way, wow. One, even who's doing all this research, and again, what are they doing all this for? Even the fake videos, the AI slop. What is all this for? Help strengthen a system powered by deception. That's all I can conclude following logic. With next audio clip that we heard, they were talking about the impact of the DEI or the cuts to research anything that seemed like it might be associated with so-called DEI. Now, the first thing that stood out to me in that segment was I thought they were going to be talking about maybe something related to racism. I don't know. Maternal mortality disparities, what I just said, food deserts, THC impact on black children maybe. Something, they say, so-called DEI. Oh no. First thing LGBTQ research. I said, oh my goodness. Is that what they mean when they say so-called DEI? That's what they're talking about? LGBTQ issues? Because they mentioned that many times within that segment. Now, they did come back around and they did say, oh yeah, and by the way, black people get, Alzheimer's more than white people, and that's something that they'd be looking at, but that research, we cutting that too. You ain't doing, get Trump, get out of here, get out of here. Make some fake videos about that too. And then they went back off on the LGBTQ thing. Now, I've been saying that too. Now, man, the white people who say they're against racism, do we immediately, how quick we get to LGBTQ and anti-sex? Man, it's not all one and the same. It is not, particularly for people classified as black. I am sure white LGBTQ people will get all of the research and help that they need. White people will be sure of that. Black people, LGBTQ or no, you're not fixing to get nothing. Black people with Alzheimer's, you're not getting nothing. That's the system of white supremacy. But they get tricky. They get that DEI thing and make you think, oh yeah, they about to talk about something racism. No, we're not talking about that at all. Let's see. They talked about the wildfires in California, that it's been a full year. Even with that, right now, they got all the so-called atmospheric river, because that's why we had all the flooding and what have you up here in Washington State. They're having that in California right now, the atmospheric river, and they've had flooding and mudslides, some of the same problems that we've had here in Washington State, because they've had all that rain and what have you. I just said, man, climate change in Seattle. That too, but still, climate change in California, man, it does not look appealing, especially Southern California. It does not look appealing at all. And it's not even a year from the wildfires, and now you got floods and such. You got lots of people. They still aren't even back in their house yet. You heard staying in the car and such, and man, they got floods and such down there. Like, man, I said that when I was there last year, though. Like, woo, climate change is, yes, climate change is going to ravage Southern California. Already has been. For sure. But that is something I would still encourage folks to be mindful about, the impact of those wildfires. I mean, you can see all of it, racial gentrification, non-white people with different ways where they can get non-white people to move. In fact, that might be one of the new ways of racial dislocation, so-called climate change. We got sea level rise here, and you're not going to be able to get no insurance, and it's going to cost about $1 million for you to upgrade your house so that you can survive if they have fires in this area or floods in this area, or if you're in Southern California, both in this area. Oh man, and you're not going to be able to afford to stay here no more, so you're going to have to move. Might even have to leave the state of California in total. That might be the new form of racial dislocation, because that sure looks like what is happening in Altadena right now. Let's see. The blood plasma segment. Now, they didn't say nothing about racial classification there either. They just said, oh man, we got a whole industry, medicines and such, derived where it's plasma derived, plasma based, and it's dependent on these poor people, disproportionately non-white. I am sure they got to go and give plasma twice a week. They spoke with the young lady. Now again, I don't know if she's white or non-white. They said she went twice a week to donate plasma. They said she was so weak she thought she was going to pass out. What? Why do we want to encourage medical apartheid for sure? Why do we want to encourage that? Is that the only way you can get medical advances? Got to go and get the poor people to give their very life force over to you? Jesus, this is, and while the president is sharing fake videos of him dumping poop on us. That segment about the plasma centers, it also reminded me of there was a science fiction film, a short. It's like 20 minutes, maybe less. But this is like 15 years ago. But it was so-called sci-fi. And in this future, black people, of course, I think a black person did this project. But in this future, they had melanin extraction centers, and they operated just like the plasma centers that you just heard. You go, they'll give you a certain amount of money, and instead of your blood plasma, they would take your melanin, so you would look like an albino after this process is complete. And that's the premise of this short. I forgot, but they were called melanin extraction centers. That's what that segment reminded me of. And even this was a one-time thing. The plasma centers, this is in perpetuity. Like, they want you. Like, it sounded, from the way that they described it, like for a lot of these, I guess, medical procedures or whatever that they derive from this plasma, they wouldn't have an industry if you didn't have poor, non-white people, victims of racism. Oh man, I can't afford a can of sardines. Oh man, we don't, even have a match to keep warm tonight. Oh man, I'm going to go to the plasma center. Maybe we'll get enough. We can get some peanut. That's the only way we would even have these plasma-based technologies. We got to have a system of racism. Man, how many businesses, industries in the system of racism are set up that way? This only works if we have a system of racism and lots of non-white people to exploit, maybe even kill themselves. Because I'm sure that happens too. You get people who sneak, because they said, I think you can only donate twice a week. I'm sure you got some non-white people figure out a way. I'm going to see if I can go 3 times a week. Maybe I can go to a clinic down the road and blah, 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 and all this old nonsense. They just want the plasma. They don't care. Let's see. They even mentioned the book in there. I had not heard of Blood Money, the story of life, death, and profit inside America's blood industry by Kathleen McLaughlin. Might be worth checking out. Reading worth more than watching television. Facts. Then can we give it up for Dr. Frances Cress Welsing? And even in fact, if we live long enough, some of those people from the summer of 2013, literally days after the Trayvon Martin murder trial, where they talked about the role impact of his consumption of THC, the non-white cows listeners who talked about how wrong Dr. Welsing was in her assessment that, hey, one of the additions to the 10 stops, her additions would be no drug consumption. We're about to be fooled. She said it explicitly. That was 2013. That segment also days after about 6 days after the Trayvon Martin murder trial. She came to speak with us, Dr. Welsing, and she said, we are about to be fooled, duped again. All this recreational cannabis, and even pause just for a reminder. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is a medical doctor. Other than Dr. M.A., who went through med school and told us about it during the procedure, I don't know which ones of you all are doctors. Folks who were talking about Dr. Welsing didn't know what she was talking about. I don't remember people giving their medical credentials when they went on to say Dr. Welsing doesn't know what she's talking about. But, oh man, she said, I have worked with these clients. They are psychotic from cannabis use and nothing else. And I'm a general and child psychiatrist, 3rd generation physician. I know what I'm talking about in this field. Now, almost 13 years later, you got recreational cannabis in more than half of the U.S. states, so-called, and you get this report at the end of the year talking about, they didn't say lots of cannabis use, they didn't say habitual cannabis use, they didn't say monthly or weekly, they said any cannabis use for teens is bad. You can see an academic drop, emotional problems, not good. And they said the same thing. We've had neuroscientists tell us this before. Hey, before you get to 25, no tackle football, no cigarettes, no alcohol, no wacky tobacco cannabis. And then give the explanation why. What they said again, your brain is still developing. And white people have done lots in the promotion of cannabis is great, it's medicinal, it'll help with pain, and there is very little, if any, wait a minute, children should not be consuming this because their brain is still developing. In fact, it's broader than children. Everybody 25 and under should not be consuming this. I don't hear that at all. In fact, I don't know, do they have regulations at any of the dispensaries where you can't get in if you're under 25? I thought it was 21. Cameron Graham, we just played that report. Black male, privileged black male in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina specifically, I believe, where he was at high school and got stabbed to death in a disagreement over a vape pen. I had to check. I could be in error, but they don't even have recreational cannabis in North Carolina, so this shouldn't even be. But it is, and Cameron Graham, deceased, won't even see 2026. I think he was 16 years old, too. Didn't even make it to so-called Christmas. Over a vape pen, stabbed to death. At school, no less, by his friend. Over a THC vape pen. Sobriety would be best, and for children, like, it's not even no cannabis. I said if I had offspring, we would have give me a report during your holiday break, so-called, about Cameron Graham. And now, bam, you're gonna have another one. Read that report about THC's impact on children, those whose brain computer is still developing, and tell me what you learned. Now you got two things to work on during the break, and even if you got college students, it would be the same, because if they're 20, you're under 25. That's no tackle football and no ganja for you either. Give me that report, and it should be eloquent, like woo-wee. Let's see what you've learned in your first couple semesters, quarters, whatever it is. But that would be a report I would share with other black parents about the impact of any, like I said, they didn't say habitual years, they said any cannabis consumption bad for academics, emotional. We already got black people with a lot of mental health problems. We've been talking about that. Increased suicide rates for black children particularly. We don't need no ganja to balance that. Let's see. And they even said that the brains from teens who use cannabis are different from the brains of teens who do not. I had said I wanted to go to the neuroscience conference. I didn't know that. I said, what do they talk about at the neuroscience conference? That's what they're talking about? Wow. We should go to the neuroscience conference. Take some children, too. They had the report on. Now, I continue to play the segment Thomas in New York 4 years ago telling us about his theory on the energy situation when they had the blackout down in Texas. That was a serious problem. Like, I think some people died, and what happened? No power for days is a big problem, emergency. But attributing this to so-called green energy initiatives, wind, solar, and the like, and getting away from coal and all of that, and that this shouldn't be an issue in Texas, but it is. It's because of these green energy initiatives, and there are going to be more to come in 2025. And I told him then, I've said now, I'm so repulsed when people come to talk to black people about things where they are not informed, not an expert. You hear some talking point or whatever and come and talk to black people specifically, because I don't think we would go and give some long-winded talk to people classified as white with our limited expertise about much of anything beyond sports, and they don't really tolerate us on sports much at all. But I don't think we would go and talk to white people about much of anything to show our, they know they wouldn't even listen, like, get on out of here. But that really bothers me. Like, if you can go talk to black people, do not talk to black people like we are stupid and dumb. Get your facts and information together. That is widely promoted in the system of white supremacy. People come and talk to black people in particular, talk down to us and just talk to us like we are totally stupid. I can just say anything to them. It doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't have to be correct. I don't have to have done any research. I can just read any old thing and whatever. Anyway, Thomas in New York talking about an energy situation in Texas. So now we hear President Trump, I'm done with these old wind projects. That would count, right? Green energy. I'm done with these old wind projects. And you got even white people that I saw complaining up in New England. I played the report where they were talking about white people in Virginia, where they were saying, oh man, the wind project is about 80% done. What do you mean you terminating for that? Security risks. You're going to let the drones in and we shutting it down. Now, I've played a few reports. This 2025, this is the year where the green energy problems were supposed to really hit hard. It's the total opposite direction. Now, it is difficult to predict things in the future, but that would be even more of a reason. Let me not go talking to black people about things unless I'm very, very sure, and this is going to be based on evidence. White people lie a lot. Hey, they might have got me with some old fake AI videos, slop, what they call it, AI slop, and I got confused about all this. Let me be sure before I go to other victims of racism with incorrect information, because I'm seeing it's going the opposite direction. White people saying, we're not on none of this old green energy, whatever. We're trying to renew coal and do all the rest of it and throw away the wind projects. More and more of that. We'll have to see how things go. I mean, it's difficult to predict, but I mean, at least at this point, no. I do not see any evidence of green energy initiatives causing massive problems for non-white people. In fact, it looks like white people are going the opposite direction. At least white people in this part of the world. Let's see. I did not hear as much information about Cholo Abdullah, the so-called Kenyan. I guess he's related to Obama, getting convicted for 2 life terms. They said he was trying to carry out a 9/11 inspired attack. Like, what? Like, I just do not remember hearing as much about this. I have to go back to see more. Did they talk about this? This would seem like did President Trump talk about Mr. Abdullah? That would seem like it would have been a major talking point. And these Africans, we ain't letting in no more Kenyans and all the rest of it. I'm stunned. All I can say, I will have to do more research to find out more details about Mr. Abdullah. I am a little less surprised about the attacks on Nigeria, where President Trump coordinated these attacks on Christmas Day. It's like, wow, particularly, he announced this on Christmas Day, and the justification for these attacks in Nigeria was, hey, ISIS, shouted Dr. Welsing, they are slaughtering Christians. That's code for white people. They're slaughtering Christians. We're not going to tolerate it. I told him before. He announces this on Christmas Day, like Jesus' birthday. That's symbolism, like when they released the movie American Sniper. That's about the killer Chris Kyle. They released it on December 25th. The symbolism of that. I think even Django, they released it on Christmas Day. The symbolism of that, to make that announcement. We're going to get these Nigerians going there. Wow. I'd said Nigeria is one of those places of the world to be mindful about because they have an enormous population of people classified as black, and it is growing exponentially. It's predicted. White people, UNICEF, they've said they think there will be 1 billion black people in Nigeria by 2100. So we're almost at 2026. So basically 70 years. They think there will be 1 billion people in just Nigeria. So, and this was something announced with fright, trepidation. They were not excited about, we're going to have a bunch of Nigerians, at the Olympics down the road. So this would be the type of thing I would expect. More instability, and Nigeria has become a terrorist nest, and we got to do something about it. And I would be very mindful. But that's part of the world. I think they might have oil, same as Venezuela, where that also could be attractive. If we're going to be here, we can kind of make it a twofer. But most importantly is the melanin concentration. Lots of dark people in Nigeria. Let's see. The segment in Algeria where they talked about calling colonization, white supremacy, racism a crime, and that they want reparations and apology from white people in France. Fuller did recommend not asking for an apology. I suspect there might be white people in France who eventually are more than willing to give an apology. That might happen in our lifetime, in short order, I might say. Now, in terms of repair, we'll have to see. But the apology, oh yeah, white people are great about that. Give out all the worthless apologies that you can imagine. And it seems they had been reluctant to do that up until this point. That might change. We'll see. We have talked about white supremacy, racism in Algeria. In fact, one of everyone's favorites, the late Frantz Fanon, he talks quite a bit about the system of white supremacy in Algiers. He spent time there, unless I am mistaken. I know Dr. Kanban talked about system of white supremacy in that part of the world as well, as many people did. But that would be one to research, see what happens if they go into details as to why they say that they are entitled to repair from France. Probably some white people from the other parts of the world as well, because they all kind of work together to maintain their system. Let's see. The segment about the non-white children not being in attendance in New Orleans, I thought that was important, even though these are not black children, and I'm very aware we have lots of folks, COWS listeners and beyond, if they're not classified as black, even the Nigerians, really, they're not born in this part of the world, well then get on out of here, because I'm, that is not my position. System of white supremacy, these people are victims of racism, and really, it didn't take very long when I thought about it. I said, well, when they report that, they're not going to school and you've seen an attendance drop in New Orleans, do I think the ICE agents are potentially rounding up white children and white parents, and that it's white children who are missing school in New Orleans, Louisiana? Absolutely not. Oh, okay. Well, these would be victims of racism then if they're not white, and they're missing school because the police are trying to round them up. Got it. System of white supremacy. Again, and I couldn't imagine it. I was going to say I couldn't imagine a world. I can't imagine any place in the world where white boys and white girls, we are afraid to go to school because they're going to get us. We might come home and mom and dad are gone and they're just looking for white people. Where in the world would that be allowed? If you can think of a location, we should all make a field trip and go there right now. But I can't think of any place in the world where that would be the environment. So this has got to be the system of white supremacy racism and them so-called, and when I say them, I mean these non-white, non-black people, where the children are not going to school in New Orleans. Them having a dislike for black people is irrelevant because lots of black people have a dislike for black. Matter of fact, I said Cameron Graham. Latinos did not kill Cameron Graham. That's the one he died in the tussle over the THC vape pen. It would be a long list of, do black people like black people? You sure? Anyway, back to New Orleans. Victims of racism. Like, man, to have all these folks in fear where it's so bad the children say, man, we can't go to school. Man, mom be gone when we get home. Like, what? Like, what? That, in fact, really, I suspect if Dr. Welsing was here, I would love to ask her about that because I suspect that, does that sound like Nazi Germany? Really, I think that was Lauren. She had said they had been calling these places, these detention camps and such in Florida and all that, like Alligator Alcatraz. They had been coming up with all these old goofy names. Same thing, they had been saying like Poolside Patty. They were coming up with these kind of cartoonish names. It would be some white person. They would be engaged in an act of racism, and as opposed to calling them by their actual name, it would be what I like Poolside Patty, something like that. Alligator Alcatraz, calling these detention facilities concentration camps. No, we can call it Alligator Alcatraz, where it makes it less, sinister, terroristic. Call that what it is. If these are non-white people and they're being mistreated on the basis of being not white, which I've heard a bunch, that's system of white supremacy. Call that what it is, and it's not Alligator Alcatraz. You got people fearful of going to a concentration camp. Oh, I understand. Yeah, man, anything happened to you, Leaf Browder. Anything happened to you in white people's concentration camps, yeah, I can understand. I wouldn't want to go either. Especially if you're just doing this on the basis of them being not white, like you're not rounding up Ukrainians and putting them in, Alligator Alcatraz or whatever, right? Okay. Let's see. They had the segment about and they were watching TV. They spoke with the little child's name was Darwin. Something about that struck me, like I was, Charles Darwin and survival of the fittest. And like, I don't know, maybe I started saying I was being ignorant. Anyway, but they said the little fella who was not going to school and such in New Orleans, he was just watching TV. And I said, oh man, victim of racism through and through. I'm not getting my education. Some instances, I might not be getting the only food that's available to me because I don't get to go to school. But I can sit at home and watch all the commercials and TV and Christmas I like. They still got Macaulay Culkin. They still got him on TV. I can watch him 2-3 times and, think about my classmates I'm missing out on. Let's see. The segment they talked about children, for white children, or maybe some non-white children who are lucky, you get the AI toy that can talk. This was another one that gave me pause, even though I don't have offspring. Same way we have talked over and over about, hey, don't give that child iPhone. Hopefully we have parents who were 100% no one gave their child an iPhone. 100% maybe, especially if folks got younger children, if they're under 15, no iPhones. Think they've been saying that increasingly. Wait as long as you can. More schools with bans and such. I had not thought of the AI technology, and wow, getting that for a young child. I was thinking, so we had Darwin. He's at home watching TV as opposed to being at school. His parents are at work or wherever, so you can just sit in front of the screen all day. What is that like when, man, you got the AI doll or whatever it is, the AI toy, and you can sit and talk with that all day as opposed to talking to an actual real person, and you just talk to that. Like, whoa. And they even said we don't really know what, the impact of that is. Like, whew. That might be one I would wait on too, because just wow. Where did this technology come from? Was this technology derived with a counter-racist bias, like the logic that these AI toys have been programmed with, in addition to the privacy concerns and who has access to these toys and the information? All of those are super valid too, but wow. I think enough of us have seen a few generations of little black boys and girls sitting in front of a TV to say, oh man, they watch all those Chips Ahoy commercials and all the rest of it. That's not constructive. I can't imagine it being much better if they get to talk to a little bot. Is this like talking to a white person? Like, oh my goodness. And the way that they think about the world, they have all the racist logic about the world and racist metaphors. It was a dark day and all the like, man, that's talking to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, and they can say all those emotional things and I love you to pieces and all that. Oh my man, that would be something to think about, maybe even before we have the children. Like, wow, let's get to maybe we can go talk to some other parents, see if they have any of these toys, and have you had problems? What's it been like? Let's do some reading. They love the YouTube. I'm sure they got some YouTube videos maybe where parents talk about this, but wow, that would be something to discuss before the child gets here. Put that right up there with education and nutrition. Are we going to breastfeed? Are we going to have a hospital birth and all the rest of it? Wow. AI toys, because you got to do the screen time and all the rest of it, see. Whew. I'm glad I'm not a parent. Let's see. And then we heard the segment, I was being ignorant, with Daniel Coons, Officer Stacy Coons. Shout to Rodney King. I was in Wisconsin, not Beaver Dam. Actually, I'm a pause because they said my sick white brother, Daniel Coons, I believe, in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. I already told you now, any place, any city I hear, city, county, whatever, that I hear in Wisconsin, if it's not Milwaukee, basically, I assume, this is probably a sundown town. They're talking about putting the cameras up and such. So Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. And sometimes, they'll tell you, no, it's not a sundown town, and it's cool, and they'll welcome everybody, and not all white people is racist. They'll say that sort of goofiness. But James Lowen's website, Sundown Towns, they just put the census data up for some of these places. So they say Beaver Dam is not an official sundown town. However, according to the 1970 census, Beaver Dam, which is not the biggest place, 14,265 people, according to the 1970 census. Out of that, 2 Negras. Sundown town. Okay, so in addition, they also include a juicy nugget for Beaver Dam. Testimony of a resident as regards to Beaver Dam being a sundown town, while the sign at the city limits feature only the rather innocuous warning that the population does not exceed 15,000. There are some very interesting things about the way race, not racism, is played out in Beaver Dam. Your definition It is indeed a sundown town. Here is the best documentation I have gotten of formal segregation. It is from a newsletter, Wayland Greetings, autumn 1969, for Wayland Academy from 1969. In Wayland Academy appointed the Black Relations Committee to make a study of Wayland through this school year to determine the feasibility of admitting Negroes to Wayland and to visit the town of Beaver Dam to determine problems which might face a Negro as he lives in his presently non-integrated community. If at the end of this study they deem Wayland as an environment to be receptive to blacks, and if the administration is also in accord, then young people of both sexes and varied backgrounds of high school age from the Milwaukee area will be selected to apply for admission. I spoke to Eli Segman, the man who spearheaded this effort, and he said that Beaver Dam was certainly intentionally all white. They had 2 niggers in 1970, so in his words, quite prejudiced. Although he was pretty sure that this was going to be difficult to demonstrate since it is a silent history. Joe Green is an alumnus who now works in the advancement office. I spoke with him about his experiences as one of the first African American students at Wayland. He told me several stories about racism he encountered and still encounters in Beaver Dam. But more to your purposes, he says that in the 4 years he was at Wayland, he was told that 2 black families lived in Beaver Dam, but he never saw any black people despite actively riding his bicycle around town limits looking for them. This is the bravest black dude I have ever heard of in my life. Now, I did go to a sundown town in Wisconsin. True. I walked around. True. But I am not riding my bike around the entire limits of the town looking for niggers. That seems now sundown town, like, oh my God, they never find me or the bike. Like, man, you're way more courageous than me. Continuing. He rode around looking for him. I guess he failed. Mr. Reed and Mr. Harris were asked to make a study of Wayland Academy throughout this school year to determine the feasibility of admitting Negroes to Wayland. The plan to visit the town of Beaver Dam to determine problems which might confront the Negro who is presently in a non-integrated community. More important, is there a desire to have frank discussions with students, faculty, administrations, and parents to determine which attitudes are prevalent. Currently, there are 6,000 African Americans living in Dodge County, between 3,000 and 4,000 of them living in Wapham Supermax Prison. I don't want to read anymore. I'm done. I knew this. This is in James Lowen's book explicitly, where he says that in some of these sundown towns, they will have a significant population of black people, but they're prisoners. And we were just told this about Wisconsin specifically. Our guest on the program, Whitefish Bay, I just told you, I went out there and had white man come on the program and talk to us, and he said the same thing, that they have the big supermax prisons out there, and we just ship niggers who don't even live nowhere close to this jurisdiction. We just bust, probably from Milwaukee, we just bust Milwaukee. And matter of fact, all of this was connected to Beaver Dam. We're going to put the AI cameras up. I played that because when I was in Wisconsin, Milwaukee specifically, I was at City Hall for their meeting about having all these cameras and technology. And, ooh, it's going to be great. And they're going to put the facial recognition technology up. And, ooh, and they said all the same things that Officer Coons, Beaver Dam, told us. Oh, it's going to be great. And there's some sort of crime spree. And if they're coming here and they stole a vehicle and all this other night. the first thing that jumped out to me from Milwaukee was all the examples of where this facial recognition and AI technology, where it worked great to stop crime. It was, what did I just say? Who at the Supermax? What they say? 3,000 and 4,000 of them live at the Watham Supermax prison. The only folks that they showed being caught with that technology were black males. I said, dang, they only arrest black males in Wisconsin? Maybe. What's the population of the Watham Supermax? If they got that many black males, is it just for black dudes? They just stuff black dudes out in Watham Supermax in Wisconsin? They didn't even put the race soldier who killed Sade Robinson. They didn't even put him out there. Max Anderson, he's not even at Watham Supermax. All his black brothers out there to greet him. Anyway, they talked about how great it would be to have all this technology. They did thankfully give pushback in that segment from John Cray Jones, ACLU. I suspect that might be a white person, but I'm not sure. It's all audio. But he gave some of the same concerns they did about the AI toy. Who's going to have access? That was a big one that they shared when I was in Milwaukee. Who gets access to this information? Just because you arrest someone, that doesn't say that they're guilty. Lots of innocent people get arrested, so who gets access to this information? Big question. How long is this information stored? It was lots of questions about this data, like how much and is the data even going to be secure? We're not even saying that you all are going to be corrupt or racist with how the data is used, misused, and sold, but dang, are you all even going to be secure in how you store this data so that you don't have breaches every other week and then, everybody has access to our information? It was lots of questions like that. In addition to the application of this, are you just going after black people? They snuck the LGBTQ anti-sex on us again, but whatever. Because like I said, they didn't give no examples in Milwaukee about how we went after LGBTQ people. It was just black dudes. Anyway, but it was lots of the same concerns presented Beaver Dam, Milwaukee, and even really in that segment where they said in some areas you're seeing people giving pushback and saying, hey, we do not want this stuff here. You promised us, it was going to stop crime or solve some of our problems. It hasn't done any of that. Oh, and matter of fact, one of the pushback talking points that they had in Milwaukee, where it was white people saying that this technology was racist and they didn't want it, one of their points was, hey, you all share all this technology with other agencies, which they had acknowledged within the meeting. So like police in Milwaukee, that's next door to Brown Deer and Cudahy and all these other locales, all these other departments, and maybe even state police and all the rest of it. If the neighboring Brown Deer, so if they have facial recognition technology, and at this time, Milwaukee, if they don't, they could go and use their facial recognition technology and swapping data, all that, we found this, blah, 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 that sort of thing. They were saying, are you looking at other databases? Are you looking for the correct purposes? That was something they asked in the report too. Like when you go to do these searches, are you searching just because, I want to look for what black people came through the area? Are you searching for an actual crime? They said sometimes it would just be investigation. Like, that's not precise. I would have lots of, and particularly if I lived in the area with black people. Like, my logic behind this, if I, like Seattle, if I lived someplace where it's a lot of white people, just what I saw in Milwaukee, I would expect large numbers of white people to come out and be totally against. You're not going to put me on camera all day long, and I got rights, I got my Second Amendment rights and all the rest of it, and I read George Orwell, and you're not going to follow me around, and Big Brother, and blah, blah, blah. Not saying that they're against racism. That might be a part of, the spiel that they give for why they don't want this, but I would expect a lot of white people to come out, no, unless you're going to keep this over in the Negroes where they live at and put it in the ghetto, put the cameras there. If you're just talking about having cameras out in the general public for everybody, putting us all on, oh, no. That's what I would expect. If you live someplace where it's a lot of black people and they don't have many white people, you might have new camera technology. I would encourage everybody, if you see Like if it comes on the news, if it's in the newspaper, because that's how I found out about the one in Milwaukee, the meeting that I attended. It was on the local news. So if you see anything in the newspaper, if you hear it on the radio, what have you, try to get informed. Like for the meeting in Milwaukee that I attended, they did make it available online. So that's one, even if you can't attend in person, you could watch it live stream online, and then they made it available on demand so you could watch it later on. It might have been on local TV there as well, but try to make yourself informed and share with other people so that other victims can be informed about this and make great decisions. Because wow, they talk about all that police state and everything that we already have. Wow, that technology would be another aspect of it, and at minimum to be aware of what sort of tools are being used. I would want to know if they have AI technology cameras on my block. I would at minimum want to be aware of that, and I'd want my children to know that too. Let's see, number again, 720-716-7300, the code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let us know if we have any parents, if you nabbed any of those wacky AI toys for your offspring. Let us know. I don't imagine I would be cool enough to. I would think it would be expensive, or whatever the case may be. But man, let us know. Did you get one? Did your child enjoy it? Were they scared? Like, man, folks hear this in the archives, if you have offspring and you got your child any of those AI toys or what have you, let us know, especially if they're younger, like under 10. Let us know. I would be very interested just to hear, what was the response? What is that experience like? Even if it changes after some time, if they were really excited, I guess, frequently children like a lot of the stuff that they get on Christmas Day, but did they have one response with the AI toy, when they first got it, and then days, weeks out, it changed? Like, I would be curious about it. As someone who doesn't have offspring, I would still be very interested to hear about that, even with the caution that I still stand by. Man, maybe that's one with the iPhone. We'll wait a little while on that till we get more feedback on that one, just in case. Any hoodles, 720-716-7300, the code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Folks are spectating and all the rest of it. I can hurry up and get back so I can work, see if we have programs for the middle of the week. Some of our guests, make sure I remind folks, like, man, we did not take no holidays for Christmas, I guess, and all the rest of it. 2025, we had white people on from all over the world. Germany, Puerto Rico, even right here in Seattle, which was wacky because at that time we were still having the biblical floods and all the rest of it. So I was hoping that our guest, Dr. Lee, wasn't going to have disruptions as a result of the storm, but thankfully that worked. But even Seattle, 206 representing on our guest list for the holidays, and white folks that we've been able to talk to. Global system indeed, and even quite a bit of time talking about one of my, I won't say favorite subject matters, but at least the subject matter that I think is important, the racially restricted regions. One, just to have our guest who was with us this past Tuesday, Mr. McDevitt, where he said these happened 400 times in Pennsylvania alone, which should be staggering. I, was able to get that question out pretty early in the program, and some of our listeners, live listeners, thought that was important as well, as did I. 400 times just in Pennsylvania, which I don't think of as being, a massive state. It's not Texas, it's not California, but 400 times, man, what does it mean to be white? I mean, if there have been that many racial purges in this area of the world, because if it's 400 in Pennsylvania, like, wow, what does that say for the rest of the continental U.S.? Not to mention the world. But if it's been that many, man, what does it mean to be white? And I said it, in my view, it is important for so many reasons, because I think so many of us, we are not aware of these incidents and how they impact us financially, emotionally, just in so many ways, even at this moment, 2025, and even just for clear and present danger. I just said you had a young lady, black female, pregnant, like 9 months, about to go into labor, pregnant, and she stops at a hospital, but this is a racially restricted region, and they are hostile to her. Now, that's not to say that you can't go to a hospital in Baltimore where there's tons of black people and still not have a bad experience. Henrietta Lacks, a racist experience. But I would, like I just said, I would at least want to know. I might be a lot more hesitant about going to get medical assistance if I know this is a racially restricted region. In fact, I might plan ahead to let's see if we can avoid this entirely, see if we can go someplace else, and or make special preparations in advance. If I know it's unavoidable, I'm going to have to be here and we just have to make the best of it, well then, I still want to know that in advance, as opposed to getting there and then having difficulties and finding, oh man, they don't even allow niggers in this area, or they purged all the niggers from this area and we ain't been back here. Like, oh man, that's one I would want to know that in advance. At least what they say, let me know what I'm walking into. Like, yes, let me know what I am walking into so that I can plan accordingly. Amongst many other reasons, I think it is important that so-called racially restricted regions, sundown towns, I think they provide a brilliant illustration. What does it mean to be white? Same thing they just said about Beaver Dam. You cannot intentionally construct an all-white town, county, whatever it is, and or go and remove all the niggers and then say we don't know nothing about racism. That does not make logical sense at all. Master deceivers, and have it happen that many times, that right there. What does it mean to be white? But we have spent a good bit of time talking about those racially restricted regions this month. And that's one you can state history. I just said 400 times in Pennsylvania, they've had these racial purges of black people. Man, if you are classified as black and you live in Pennsylvania, check and see. Our city, did they have one of these? Do we live close to one of these incidents? There should be at least two of them. And I would ask other black people, if I lived in Pennsylvania, did you know this? 400 of these? Did you know about some of these events? Did you? And if you got, relatives and such that have a connection to that area, see if they knew about some of these incidents. Have you heard about some of these incidents? Did you have relatives that lost property, a house, somebody lost a life in all of this? Because sometimes they make you leave short notice or else. But that's the sort of thing that I've said for years. Study local history. I've said that for years. Study local history. Non-white persons say that, I'm bored or I don't know what to do. You don't have access to non-white people to do counter-racist things. Hey, you can study. Dr. Welsing said this. This one should be very fruitful, and especially if it's not been a lot of research done, which seems to be the case for some of these sundown towns. Man, you could write a whole book on just one of these incidents. That's why I say it's such a ripe field, because it just hasn't been that much work done. I think they even said it's so-called silent history, which it reveals a lot about what it means to be classified as white and the ramifications for today. These areas, most of them, or I won't say most, but many of them, they are still all white, which implies the refinement. White people are not ignorant. They intend to keep up what their parents built for them. This beautiful little white slice of heaven with no niggers, unless they come in to do a little landscaping and cleaning, and then they make sure they get out of here by dark. Unless they're at the Supermax. But that can be a family project type thing. That can be one individual. If you have children, You all can go to the library and like you could divvy it up. Everybody go and see if they can find one if we're in Pennsylvania. And these are so many of them. He talked about the one in South Bend, Indiana, our guest from this past week. Man, you can divvy it up and go see what we find this week. We find one, we come back, share the articles that we found about those locations, see if we can find more information, more research, at least be knowledgeable about these incidents that happen in your area. And for the local incidents, I would use them to talk to other non-white people, because this impacts all areas of people activity. They want to talk about business or economics or why black people aren't in a better, state at this point, 2026. Hey, they had a racial purge where black people lost everything and had to get out of town with 5 hours to pack everything they had in their life or else. And they had fire sales, as they say, and stole black people's property and everything. That's why we've been set back economically. We haven't even recovered from that purge they had here in 1928. What? That's the sort of thing, because that, particularly if you have the information where this did actually happen, and this is just state history, local history that we just haven't been taught, oh yeah, I would bring that up, because then I don't even have to mention racism per se, just this happened. This is our state history. They got a book at the library about this. Oh yeah, I would bring that up. And like I said, individual project, group project, you never know. It could be the sort of thing where you could end up writing a book, because you could end up finding, if you're looking at things that happen where you live, you could end up finding where your parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whomever, people that you have a direct connection to, that they were the victims of some of this, where they had to pick up and get out of here, get clothes on your back or whatever you can and get your baby and get the heck out of here type of a thing. Who knows? And even if it's not direct relatives, it is a chance to learn about the system of white supremacy, racism at a local level. That's exactly the sort of thing that Dr. Frances Cress Welsing talked about. And I say it will be very illuminating. Fuller talked about the most familiar mystery. This here is mysterious behavior. Kick all the niggers out of town and then lie about it and act like it never happened and do it over and over and over hundreds of times. That is mysterious. Should be studied. We did our part this here month at the C.O.W.S. Hopefully. You can go back and check the archives, see if it is worthy of your time and energy. Anywho, give folks maybe 2 minutes, see if they have anything to share, if they're spectating, doing their eggnog and such for the so-called holidays. We will be here for, at minimum, we'll be here Thursday for Neutralizing Workplace Racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I think that'll be the new year. If you look at I think that's 2026, so that'll be the first program of the new year. And then Friday, the Catherine Massey Book Club, as we wrap up tonight. We bombed the U.S. Capitol, but that'll be at minimum Thursday, Friday, headed into the new year. And as I said, might even see if we slip in something between now and Wednesday. Just check social media. I will share updates. Invest if you think the C.O.W.S is constructive. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button in the top right corner. You'll see the PayPal button. Beneath the PayPal button, you'll see the links for Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who kept us on the air for 17 years. We make it to February. Wacky. Hopefully, we have been accurate more often than not, worthy of your time and energy. And you can hit the Amazon wish list linked at the blog and at Amazon under Gus T. Renegade. Again, huge thanks to all the investors who nabbed an item or three over the years, helped us stay on the air, hopefully worthy of your life currency. That's it. We will be back a few days minimum, at least by Thursday. Sobriety would be best, certainly, for Cameron Graham, non-white teens. We do not need the wacky tobacco to ring in the new year. But beyond all of that, if you're going to be out and about, they will probably have sobriety checkpoints tonight through next weekend, really, I would think. You do not want to be out and about, especially if you have not been driving that long. You're in your teens, 20s, classified as black. Oh, man, you are asking for trouble. And that's really because they can say that you're driving under the influence with the cannabis, even if it's recreationally legal where you live, or the alcohol or whatever else. And I've said, at least for this month, I've been saying, even if you're out and you do the responsible thing and get the Uber or whatever on Oscar Grant, there is no guarantee that is going to work out safely either. And I personally, even if I'm in a Uber, Lyft, whatever it is, and I'm in the back seat, buckled up, all that, I am not interested in we've been stopped by some race soldier. Man, we got to talk to them and, do their questions or what have you, satisfy them so they'll let us go. If I'm under the influence, like, oh man, you talking about messing up my whole buzz for the evening. Come on. Nope. Get to one location and stay there. If you got, homies that you want to meet up with and have a good time, maybe you haven't seen them in a while, pick one spot, stay there. You all can leave sober and safely in the morning. Shouldn't be any problem. The sobriety checkpoints are generally not at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. It's the PM that you have to worry about, or midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., asking for trouble. Dr. Cambon reminded us of this all the time during his time on the planet. Black people driving late at night in the system of white supremacy is always a bad idea. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Remind us, stop producing throwaway offspring. Remind us to maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.